This is Short Hammer. It is the 24th of February, 2020, and this is Trading Zones. We're looking at BYND, and this is on the daily chart. BYND does have earnings coming up on the 27th of February. And for me, it's kind of in a midpoint, and I know the market's pulling back, and everyone's probably thinking about buying the dip. I'll get into that a little bit later. But for BYND, I'm watching 2 points. It tends to move roughly about 15 to 20 points on earnings on average. I'll look through the last few. And being that it's at a midpoint right here, it's actually a wonderful area. If you're going to put on a strategy, for me, I'm watching 2 points. I'm watching the 95.62 area as far as the downward area it can go to potentially. I like that area for some strange reason. And I'm watching the 135.27. So these two areas, the areas that I'm watching for this week on BYND. And I'm not saying it's going to rest in that area, but those are the areas I'm expecting for it to reach in some capacity. And may I be wrong? It's possible, but I like those areas. So I'll be keeping an eye on that to see how BYND moves. I do believe they had a promotion that they're running right now with KFC that they're just trying to pump things up heading into earnings, and we'll see how that shakes out. But those are the levels that I'm watching, the 95s and the 135s on BYND. We'll see how those shake out. And if we get there, you never know with earnings. Earnings are definitely a dice roll. Sometimes you hit, sometimes you don't if you decide to play them. So those are levels that I like. We'll see how this shakes out. I might put on some sort of a strategy for that, but we'll see how that works out. Let's move on. Look at our next thing. And next up, we're going to go directly to DLTR, Dollar Tree. Now, this was one of our alerts from last week. We gave a heads up that we wanted to keep an eye on this. Actually, last couple of weeks, we've been talking about the Dollar Tree. That it's in the buy area. And so far, not looking too shabby. It's on its way back up. What we want to watch for is what do we do at this 94.69 area? Earnings is on the 2nd of March. So will this, at this candle structure here, will we see resistance here and will we head back down to the 91 area and then bounce and buy back up? We have to wait to see. But we were calling Dollar Tree down here in the 86s and the 88s. And so far, it's been giving us a nice movement to the upside. So definitely wonderful Dollar Tree. That worked out perfectly, exactly how we were planning for it to work out. And at any point, you could have scaled out on this move to the upside and locked in some profits and, roll a little bit for the end. So let's look at, in the same vein, ISRG on the daily. We called ISRG down here around this 601 area. We did get a flare down, and that was perfect entry right above this 590 area. 593 right here. But regardless, could have been in here. And our expectation was a push up into the next supply demand area, the 614. That happened. Look at our video. You'll see that we were watching and waiting for this to happen. And we're not saying that every time we look at the setup that it's going to happen, but you only need roughly a 60 to 70% win rate. And if you're managing your risk the proper way, you're going to be making a ton of money in this market. So ISRG worked out. What do we see ISRG doing from here? It may buy back up and pop the top. Watch this top. Watch to see if we get back over the 16s. If we're over the 618s, over the 619s, and we start to see the volume increase and we push to the upside, you've got something. If this area holds as a top, and we sell back through the lower sixes, I might be looking for a short setup to fade this back down. ISRG is a mover, and it looks like right around this 593 is the area. Below that, then it's 580. So I'll be watching ISRG and seeing if these levels hold, and if these levels do not hold, and the buyers decide to take profits, I'll be fading ISRG back to the downside. But for me, I'm just playing level to level, and right now it's below a level. Would I get short here and fade this to the downside? No, because this thing has been strong. But if we do get below this, the 601 area, I might use that as a point where I might try to fade that back to the downside and just exit or scale out at each level as we go down. And then if we break back above and hold and I see bullish candles formations, I'll exit that short position. So we'll see. I'm going to be watching this 601 area to see if we go back down, and watching the upper 16s, meaning 617, 618, 619s, to see if we break and we run. We'll see how that works out. But I'll wait for the movement to declare itself, and then I just follow the momentum in either direction. Next up, let's take a peek at Amazon. Now, we've been watching Amazon. We love Amazon. It's my favorite ticker. I love Amazon so much. And we did see some sell side come in. We had the FOMC, and after FOMC, it failed to make new highs. And the downward, the sellers in Amazon just came in and took over in force. So if we want to break this down, take a peek at the 1 hour. We sort of see this area here, tapped it twice. Then we had a lower low wave. This wave couldn't get back up there. Then we just rolled. And we see this little trend line that we could have kept an eye on here. I popped this in because I thought this was interesting. And I was watching this. Now, this is not a trend line that I had before. This is actually, I added this a little bit late in the game. But I was watching this for the break, and I noticed this trend headed into Thursday. And I'm like, I wonder if we're going to get through that. And we did. Where are we now? That's what's important. So looking at this candle structure here, 2092 was the area that we mentioned. 2075 is the next area, and the 2050s was prior to this year. That was the all-time highs. Is it possible that we drop down to the 2050s? It is possible. Is it probable? Not sure. We have to see what the market does. Right now, people are starting to really think about the coronavirus and pay attention to what we said like 2 or 3 videos ago. I think what most of us were thinking. When will the market start to think about the supply chain, the global supply chain, and how this could impact, how the coronavirus could impact that? And that's something that we were really focused on. I think most traders were thinking about. But, you follow the momentum until the momentum changes. And even if you hedge yourself, you still follow the momentum. You don't try to guess the top. You wait for the top to declare itself. And so right now we have a nice little pullback in Amazon. There are people that were stepping into 2092, expecting a retrace back up to the 2130s. We'll see if that happens. For me, I am going to watch to see what we do off of this 2092 area. If we're bearish, then I might be fading this down to the 2075. If we're bullish, I might be looking for a run up into the 2110s, 2115s, potentially, or 21 teens, I'll say. And if we get more strength, maybe into the 2130s. But for me, Amazon is an expansion / contraction ticker. So it may move, 30 points, 50 points, 100 points in a day. But then it may have a week where it stays in roughly a 10 to 15 point range where it doesn't move too much. So I'll be keeping an eye on Amazon to see what it decides to do. Do we have more downside in here? I'm going to wait for clear declarations of downside. And if I see Amazon begin to the downside, I'm going to be watching the overall market to see if it's a market trend. Are we bearish overall? And then I'll be looking to enter Amazon and potentially ride it down. But the space between the 2092 and the 2075, based on the drop the last few days, I'm going to be careful about jumping in here because it has not been in a consolidation phase. It's been in an expansion phase. So I'm going to be careful trying to jump in and catch a move and expecting some big move down to the 2050s. I'm going to keep it light, and I'll look for clear intraday setups and also trend to see if I'm going to take Amazon to the downside or to the upside. And if we open up gap down to the 2075s, I'm going to be watching to see if the buyers think that's a value area. Do they want to get in there and try to take it back to the upside? So that's what I'll be watching on Amazon. And if we open gap down to 2075 and the buyers roll this, then I'll be taking it to the 2050s. But I'm going to watch the open, and I want to see off these different zones, what are the buyers and the sellers telling me? What's the price action telling me? What's the trend of the market telling me? What are the futures? Are the futures trending down? The futures trending up? The overall market, what's it telling me? And I want to follow that momentum. If the ticker that I'm trading does not have news of its own, keep an eye on the particular sector and see if the sector is either more bearish or more bullish. Keep an eye on the index that it may be in, and keep an eye on the overall market movement. Is the ticker that you trade, does it follow the trend of the market? And most do. Or is it one of those things that it moves to the beat of its own drum? Really learn the tickers that you trade and figure out what do they do when the market makes certain movements. But that's what I'm planning on Amazon, and I'll be keeping an eye on that and on those levels. Next up, take a peek at NVIDIA. Now, NVIDIA has been in a wonderful jam session to the upside, and now we are pulling back. What can we expect from NVIDIA? Really good numbers. Is this just a profit take? Is this just a reaction to the overall market? And what you want to keep an eye on are all those tickers that have recently beat earnings. And as they fall to value areas, you might look to start scaling in small positions to see if the buyers step back in. Because once, whatever the reason, the overall market is pulling back, whatever that thing is, once that abates, people are going to go back and take a peek at the technicals and the fundamentals and look for a reason to buy. So I'm watching this pullback on NVIDIA, and it's back near the 291 area. Is that a value area potentially? People may see it that way. You just have to see what happens. Do we buy back up? For me, I'm not taking this long off of this 291. That I wouldn't do that. I want to see what happens up here on the 295s. I want to see if here the buyers step in and give us a little bit of volume action here, and then we can squeeze to the 303s. If we get here and I see bearish action back down to the 291s, once we fail the 291s with volume, then I will be fading this down to the 282s. And yes, I'll be scaling out on the in-between portions, but I will be watching this to the downside. But my thing that I'm watching is, what do we do at the 295s? If we open up gap down, will we be down to the 282 level? Will we be above? If we're above, I don't like to take midpoints unless there's like strong candle structure at that midpoint that I can use to base my movement off of, to say, hey, this is a place where buyers and sellers have had a disagreement before. And last time, did the buyers win? Did the sellers win? And so based on that, if I'm in between a zone and I really like a setup, I might take it. And that's when I'll be using, the power of pivot script to give me an idea of roughly what's going on. And when we popped all these all-time highs, I had to use the power of pivot script, because basically when I do my zones, I'm more of a retracement trader. It's been there before. I want to see sort of a past pattern setting up again, and I follow that pattern based on price action and volume, and also the momentum in the market. But NVIDIA is interesting. Watch those levels that I mentioned, and we'll see how that shakes out. Let's run on over to Netflix. Now, Netflix, oopsie, here we go. Now, Netflix in and of itself, this 384 area, I haven't done the zones above this yet, because what I've been waiting for is to see if we're going to hold this 384. And this is a very important area. If you remember what we mentioned on Netflix, that 384 area is an area that has held going back to 2018, I believe, is the last time we were above that area on Netflix. And so what we want to do is we want to see, is Netflix going to get back above this 384 and give us a squeeze back to the 4 or up into these 405s? Look at this. Rejection, 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 rejection. Couldn't quite get there. Rejection. Broke back above. We're pulling back below. Will the buyers step in and squeeze us back above? We'll see. Will we open up gap down to the 370s? We'll see. So I'll be watching Netflix to see how this sets up, because to me it has the potential. And coming into this, in our previous video we were watching, will it break this 384 area similar to how Tesla broke that the 380s? And will we see an upwards momentum and positive news come in that takes this to the next level? It didn't happen. And this could just be, that Netflix is a victim of circumstance, where you just have the downturn in the market based on the coronavirus and other risk factors. And also people potentially taking profits and selling to be able to pay their taxes. It is that time of year. But keep an eye on Netflix. Let's see what we do off of this 384. And if we cannot get back above, this may be a good ticker to start to fade. Keep an eye on what they're saying about Roku and the competition. There's a lot of competition that Netflix seems to be dealing with. Every time you turn around, there's another company that's launching a streaming service and someone else is pulling content from Netflix. So we just have to keep an eye on this. But I'm watching these levels. Watch the 370. If we gap down to that, do the buyers step in? If they do not, do we now roll to the 360s? That's an interesting area to watch. Will the buyers step in and push us back above the 384? Will we be bullish? Will we make a new high above these 390s? That's something to watch on Netflix. Keep your eye on this to see where do the buyers step in? Where is the value buy? Don't get caught up in the overall fear that's gripping the market. Whenever things are either running up hot or pulling back, wait for the first signs that the buyers may be exhausted, and then look for your entering your position to follow the momentum down. And as we're going down, what's the first relief bounce area? You don't have to guess. Wait for the price action to tell you the candle structure. Wait for the volume. It'll tell you. So I'll be watching Netflix. I'll see if we dip down to the 370 area here, and if buyers step in. And in between here, I'm really not going to be playing this too much, maybe with a few pivot plays on the intraday. But primarily, if I'm going to be sizing into this, I want to see a break back above 384 to get long. Or if we draw down to the 370s, bullish candlestick formations, volume, trend reversal, I'll slide in for a quick run to the upside. And if we crack this, I'll be fading it down to the 360s. That's my plan on Netflix. Can it go lower? That's possible, but I'm playing zone to zone, and I'll definitely be scaling out and being out of that, a significant amount of my position zone to zone. We saw here, we had a gap here on earnings. Will this be an area where we stop if we sell hard? We have to wait to see how the market opens on Monday. Futures did dip and gap down, but we could easily buy back up before the open. So we'll see how this shakes out. But that's what I'm looking for on Netflix. Apple, same thing. We are, let's see, widen this out. Let me drag this and widen this so you can see my screen and my numbers. Okay. So we did sell off of the 328s. It looks like the upper 320s. We pulled back through the 318s. And what are we watching for? Okay. Will the buyers hold this point here? This 311-ish, 312-ish area? Will they hold that? Yes or no? If not, will we drop down to the 308s? For me, let me slide over a little bit here. Let's see, what am I watching? For me, I am going to have an eye here on this 311.86-ish area. And actually it's 312, but I'm gonna keep my eye on this area. I want to see if buyers hold us above that, or if we roll down to the 308s, and if we can sell below this into the 295s. We saw the last dip to the lower 300s. Buyers did step in and push us back to the upside. So now sort of a thing where we're pushing back here. Will buyers step in? Will we open up gap down? We'll see. But I'm going to play off of these points. To me, I'm watching the 295 area. That's a good rest point. A great rest point would actually be down here around the 270s. That would be nice also. But we'll see how this shakes out. I will be keeping an eye on Apple. They do have significant risks based on what's happening with Foxconn and their production lines in China. We'll see how this shakes out, but I am watching this to see what we do off of these levels. If we open up gap down around the 308s, I want to see if the previous swing low here at the 302, 303 area, if that holds, and if the buyers step in there, or if we just roll and splash to the 295s. So I'm being careful on Apple and watching these previous levels where the buyers stepped in, and seeing if we get any pullbacks into supply demand areas that I can fade to the downside if the selling activity in the market continues. If the buy the dippers, the bull step in and push this bad boy up above the 318s, I'll be keeping an eye for bullish formations and volume to take it back to the upside. But here, if we buy back up a little bit, I'm still bearish into the 318s. And this was level that we mentioned last week, I believe, in our last video to watch. So we'll see how this shakes out, keeping an eye on Apple, and we'll see if there's more downside here or if this sort of begins to flatten out. Facebook, the 210s, this is the area we marked previously. We did like it. We are back above that, barely bounced off the 208s. So for me, I'm watching to see if we see buying and a squeeze back through the 212s. If not, I'll look for a crack of the 208s, and I'll look for selling activity to take this down to potentially the 203s. I do see this little area here where it looks like some buyers stepped in after we dropped down here. So 206, they stepped in and brought us back up. But for me, and here too, so we pushed into this line, sold back down, they pushed us back through. So maybe this is the area to watch. This 207, 206-ish area is the area to watch on Facebook. But I'll be watching to see where we open. If we open gap below the 208, I'll be looking for sell side activity to push us down to 203.75s. I will be careful around this middle area, 207 to 206, to see if the buyers do step in again and push us back to the upside. But a natural resting point does look like the 203.92 area. If we buy back up and we're above the 210s, watch the 212s, then the 214s, and above that, the 218s. But I'm not sure how much movement we will be having this week. We've sold off based on the run up. It's not sizable, but it's a significant amount that people should keep an eye on to see if we are truly about to go back down in a big way and take a bite out of this run that we've been on, or if the buyers step in again and push us back to the upside. So we have to wait and see how the market's reacting to global supply chain interruption, and just the fear of how the coronavirus may spread, and also the fear of, have we hit the top? So we'll see. But watch these levels on Facebook. We'll see if the 208s hold. We'll see if the 210s hold. And we'll see if we see some buying or we see a gap down. Watch this midpoint, as I mentioned earlier. Let's move on. Intel's interesting. We want to keep an eye on it around the 63.77 area. If the buyers step in, watch for it push back up to the 65.59s. If we open up gap below the 63.70s, then I'll be watching the 62.06 as my next level. With Intel, I'll definitely, if I'm taking options on this, I'm always in the money. And you definitely want to get a few of these bad boys, just because the movement may not be as big. You know, you might get $1.50 most days. So you really want to play this tight off of the supply demand areas. For me, I'm in quick and I am out just as quickly if an area reclaims and holds on the intraday chart. And I'm waiting. I watch for either higher highs or higher lows, and I'm out. And if it goes in my direction, I'm scaling on the drop or I'm scaling on the run back to the upside. But I do like Intel. Watch these levels and let's see what we get here. If we do open up gap down and we're in a midpoint, for me, I usually wait for the candle structure to begin to paint a picture and the momentum to paint a picture. And if we pull back into an area where there's been selling on the day, I may look to enter there, whether it be at pre-market highs or pre-market lows, and use that as something to play off of for the intraday movement if it's not where I want it to be based on the zones that I have here. And usually with a ticker where there is not that much room, I wait for it to reach one of my zones, and the reaction from that is usually what I'll play. On to CI. Now, CI, this was ripping and running, and now we're pulling back down a bit. I'm going to be watching the 215s. This was a significant area post and pre-earnings. We'll see how this shakes out if we continue to the downside with healthcare. Healthcare has some political overtones. It seems when Bernie Sanders does well, it tends to go down. So we just have to keep an eye on this 215 area and seeing if we get below that and we see some sell side. I'll be watching CI closely, and Anthem and HUM. All those tickers tend to move together. And I will be watching this to see if we see buyers step in and a push back to the upside to the 222.80 area. But if we get below this, I'll be watching the 211s as a potential area that we can see the buyers step in and maybe get a retest of the 215s. If we fail the 211s, then the 206s are definitely what I'll be watching, and I will be short into that level. But even though I don't have a supply demand area drawn here in the 211s, that the 211.50 to 212 area is an area to really keep an eye on when it comes to CI. And I will be watching that tomorrow. So even if I get short below the 215s, I'll be scaling out most of my position before we cross into the 212s. In the 211 area, I would be out most of my position there and looking for any reason to exit the rest of my position if we dip down to there. If we gap down to there, I will be waiting to see if the buyers step in and give us a retest of the 215s. If you like this video, please don't hesitate to tap the like button. And if you'd like to receive more content like this, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Power of Pivots, where you can look forward to receiving not just content from me, but videos from Elisa as she shows you how she utilizes her power of pivot script to find great intraday plays and also swing plays. It's also a wonderful thing to use her strategies if you're looking for levels when the ticker's making higher highs that, or should I say all-time highs or all-time lows. The power of pivots is a predictive software, and it can sort of tell you where things are going. Thank you so much for your time, and hopefully you have a wonderful week trading.